Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Tony Hawk, pro skater, and this is The Breakdown.
What, in your opinion, is the best skate movie you've ever seen? The best depiction of skating?
That's a good question. I think there are different movies for their time and place. That being said, Gleaming the Cube probably had one of the most legit skate scenes because it was all pro skaters and Stacey Peralta was co-producing it. And surprisingly, Police Academy 4. We were the stunt crew and we were allowed to just do whatever we wanted. So we had free reign to go downtown in Toronto and close off spots and do wall rides and jump over fountains. And so that one was kind of like a legit street section. I think the apex of skating in a movie was Back to the Future. That inspired a whole generation of kids to start skating. Not the best skate segment, but it was enough to get them into it. I have seen Grind. I politely declined any role in the movie for obvious reasons. All right, so here's Grind. So this looks like a pretty average competition site, say in the late 90s or the 2000s, because a lot of the X Games stuff was outdoors. It was all wood. Street courses were actually more like ramp courses, so a lot of transitions, a lot of coping, and that's what you're seeing in the background. So this looks fairly legitimate so far. Oh, I forgot Randy Quaid was in this. And there's a quarter pipe. Blunt fakie, that's a solid trick. Feeble grind on a really low rail. And so that kind of stuff, like the nose manual, going across, like these are all standard rail tricks. Hold on, just pause that. So for instance, the one where the guy did a nose manual up on the deck of one of the quarter pipes, that's not something you're gonna see in competition because the quarter pipes at the ends are usually just for getting from point A to point B. If he's gonna do any sort of nose manual trick, it would be a nose grind. So if he was actually grinding on the coping right there, I would believe that that was a skate competition trick. This is just more for show. I mean, just so you have some action going on. And right here, this backside 360, that's pretty solid. Like he's gonna do a backside 360 over the sort of launch box. That's the kind of thing we see in the mega ramp events now. But for this one, I think they were working within a pretty limited space. You can tell how the bleachers are sort of crowded, like they have a small crowd and they've sort of scattered them to make it look like it's more than it is. I think this is more like the budget. They didn't have enough money for a lot of extras. Generally at a skate event, you can dress how you want, yeah. With the Olympics coming, I don't know if that's gonna be the case. To be honest, I'm not part of that process or what rules are gonna be put in place. But at a skate contest, yeah, it's just more what's functional or what kind of statement you want to make. But I feel like this is very much in tune with the look of that era. Because what was this, around 2002-ish? In a vert competition, you don't really have to wear anything. The vert skaters choose to wear knee pads and at least a helmet because of the risk factors involved. I definitely rely on my elbow pads to save me quite a bit, but that's the thing about skateboarding, there really aren't any rules, even in competition. Those tricks would not have scored very huge. I mean, we saw basic board slide, basic feeble grind, no slide, crooked grind. I would say they'd be hard pressed to make the finals. And the only reason they make the finals is because someone else who was more talented bailed and missed their run. Okay, so this is more vert skating. And generally, you wouldn't have two guys on the ramp at a time unless you're actually doing a choreographed routine with them. That's something that's planned ahead. It's not some battle, it's not some last man standing type of thing where two people enter the ramp and then only one is like, it's one at a time. We're just skating vert. Otherwise, it gets really dangerous. And right there, we have Bucky Lassick, who I assume is doubling for whoever. That's a McTwist. That's solid vert trick, still to this day, will get you points. Those are all real companies. A few still exist. S, America, and Etnies are all the same umbrella group. That's the shoe company they got in to sponsor or to give product to the movie. I think if you have the crowd behind you, it definitely helps. And especially if you're in competition mode, they might encourage you to try something that maybe you've been debating. I would credit the crowd for getting me to land my first 900, because that night I really didn't expect to even try it. And then once I started trying it and the crowd was so hyped on it, I thought I gotta do it for them. Right there is a backside 360. That's a super hard trick. You're landing blind to the ramp. That's the worst angle you could have had on it. But okay, so it went straight from backside 360, and then suddenly he's turned the other way. So bad editing there. See, right there he's going backwards, and then he's going forward again into a nose grind. And I can tell you from years of experience, you would never, ever, ever drop in on someone who's just landing a nose grind. That doesn't happen. It's almost like he tried to cut him off on a wave. Okay, so that right there was Bucky's signature trick. Frontside cab, heel flip, frontside air. And that was Bucky's trick. He was the only one that could do it at the time. It was almost like having this trick in the movie gave it that validation. They're like, we do have pro skaters in this movie and doing some of the hardest tricks. Yeah, that's just absurd. What, is it interference tap? I don't know. You would never be willingly interfering with someone's run. I would assume you'd be disqualified. I don't know. We've never ever experienced that in skateboarding, so this is exploring new territory. Right there, that's a frontside invert, pretty standard vert trick. Another cab mute, and then that is a fakie to fakie 540, which turned into a bail. See, that was a weird edit because he has it right there. He's actually spinning. He's gonna probably land backwards again. So it's fakie to, or actually he was doing a 720 there. I take that back. So they cut this a little wonky. Right there, he was spinning and his body was doing a full 720. So right there, he's on his last 360. And then they cut to a backside air 360. So that's a different grab, different trick, different body motion. And then they cut to another 720 bail. I see, so he's bailing a 720. That's what they're getting at. But it was weird to throw in that backside 360 in the middle of that because it was not the right, it doesn't match anything. It's not the right motion. And right there, he's clearly on the board. Usually on a 720, you would grab what we call mute, which is between your toes with your front hand. And then on that backside 360 is when you're grabbing what we call melon, and that's with your front hand around your heels. So you can see that the grab changes there. That's Andrecht right there. That's a kind of hand plant. And right there, like, you can't be knocking people's skateboards out of their hands. This is like West Side Story. There you go. But the irony is that little tap of a board wouldn't knock you off anyway. You could handle that if you were expecting it for sure. Even if you're not expecting it, you're just gonna feel a little bump on your board, but you can still make it. Now like heel flip, big twist, all solid vert tricks, all ones. Okay, I don't remember much about this movie, but this is the most painful sequence for me because this trick right here is a trick that Bucky was working on during that time. It's a heel flip frontside 540. So he's doing a heel flip and his body's doing a full 1.5 spin while going frontside. No one had ever done it. He gets super close right here. You can see how he catches his board and then he's actually putting it back on his feet. That's probably his closest attempt ever right there. And then instead of what I assume allowing him to make the trick and waiting for him to actually get it, they cut to a different grab right there. That's actually a lean melon grab, frontside 540. That is not how he was catching his board. That is not the hand he was using to catch his board, but this is the make. And I remember thinking like, that is such a lame edit. Like, come on. He's doing a frontside heel flip 540 and then you're showing him landing a totally different trick.
They never showed Bucky the edit before they put it out.
I don't think that we had any say in that. Not we, but as the pro skaters, especially in these days, when we were asked to be in a movie, like it was just more like, you're lucky to be in this. You're lucky to be stunt doubling. You're not controlling this narrative.
What did you think of those clips that we saw?
I thought the skating in those clips was legit. You know, there's some magical editing. I think that the problem is they didn't have a skater in the editing room. That's it. But the skating that they did document was good. I think Chad Fernandez was one of the few guys that actually got a part and was a skater in it. There were a lot of stunt doubles for the actors, but Chad Fernandez actually had a speaking part. Next up is a movie I'm familiar with, Gleaming the Cube. So this is the warehouse scene. This is actually Mike McGill doubling for Christian Slater, but for this movie, I was in it, we had to teach Christian Slater how to look comfortable on a skateboard. So we would go with him to schoolyards before shooting and spend a couple hours just showing him how to sort of slalom and pick up his board and just look so he looked comfortable. So those scenes where they cut away with him and his upper body, he is actually skating. But the funny thing about this is mostly Mike McGill doing street skating. And Mike McGill is more known as a vert pool skater. But since Mike was like the perfect stunt double for him, they said, okay, we're gonna make this warehouse into your own little street course. And so you see Mike with a rare board slide on a handrail here. So Mike's goofy-footed, and here he is doing a method off the plywood. This is pretty awesome. That is what we would call an alley-oop wall ride. Not an easy trick in any context, but for him to come off onto the flat ground like that, it makes it even harder because he's not going down a ramp. I gotta give Mike props on that one. I mean, this was shot in '89. To this day, that would be a hard trick to make. Okay, so here's the deal. This changes to Rodney Mullen on Rodney Mullen's board. So suddenly his board is about 6 inches narrower than the one he was riding, and Rodney's regular foot. So there's a bit of suspended disbelief in there where it's like, you just have to be in the mix and you have to appreciate that they got Rodney Mullen to stunt double Christian Slater. I mean, we all have to just sort of accept it, because he's a genius. All that rail stuff and this, that's pure Rodney Mullen. That's his signature stuff. I mean, all those things that he was doing, usually you would just do one at a time and then land on your board with all 4 wheels. He's snapping one into the other and landing on 2 wheels and keeping his wheels up and then going into another trick, like only from the mind of Rodney Mullen. That's why he's truly the godfather of modern street skating. And then all that stuff, we call that a pogo, and all this fancy footwork, like that's all straight from late 70s, early 80s, and even 360s. Like no one can do 360s these days. And then right there he's on 1 wheel. Chuck Taylors were pretty standard for skaters, especially in the sort of early, mid 80s. There weren't that many skate shoes available. Vans didn't really come on the scene until the early 80s, so I have plenty of footage in Chucks. And this is the Amazing Spider-Man, which I am honestly not familiar with. Okay, not sure what was going on there. It looked like he was trying to ollie. He's regular foot there, and right there he was goofy-footed. So he's definitely switching his stance up, which means we know there's more than one person stunt doubling him. That's a weird edit right there with the 360 on the ground. But he like tried to ollie and he kept his foot on the board. You can see that his foot is attached to his board in an unnatural way. So definitely his back foot right there is stuck to the board somehow with something other than gravity. So that's a tell right there where it's like, all right, we're not in reality here. And that right there is a kickflip to fakie on a legit vert wall. Okay, super fake there, real, super fake. How do you keep your feet on a skateboard when you do a backflip from a wall? I've been skating a long time, I've seen a lot of stuff, but I know that's not real. I actually know the stuntman who did that, William Spencer. He must have had the skateboard attached to the shoes, and to go around and do a backflip and be confident enough and skilled enough to know that you actually are going to land on your feet is pretty awesome. Because that's risky. Like, it's like, imagine that you strapped a snowboard to your feet and someone threw you in a backflip. You gotta still land it. And that's what he did. But we know it's not real. Okay, there's another one where he does the back handspring. It's interesting where they choose to strap his feet to the board. Because if you think about it, his feet are stuck, he can't move them. So they had to have like the perfect position of where his feet are. And I guess it works. Oh, what about forklift? So stationary manuals on forklifts, not really a skate thing. Or handstands on forklifts. So I guess that's where we have to realize that he's Spider-Man. Okay, hold it right there. I'm not saying no one could ollie that high, but you can tell by the way that he's holding the same position as he goes down, that's not the actual height that he jumped down. Because as you jump down something, you have to continually straighten your legs to keep your board on your feet. Like that's just how to sort of counteract gravity and friction. As you're going down, you're sort of keeping your board on your feet until you finally get to the ground and then you compress. And so he's already just stuck in that position. So his board would be flying away from his feet probably halfway through that. And then when he lands, you would generally land and sort of wobble a bit because of the force you put on your board. And a lot of times that forces your wheel to rub on your board itself, and we call that wheel bite. So basically wheel bite is when you land and you land with such force that your wheel hits right here, and that stops your motion. The way he lands, he's super solid. There's no sign of any sort of wobbling. That's how I know that he didn't jump that high. I think it is possible to jump that high. I mean, one of our skaters, Jaws, Aaron Hamoki, holds the world record for 24 stairs. So what Jaws did when he did his huge set of stairs is he put wax right here where his wheel would normally rub, and that allowed his wheel to keep spinning a little bit. But you can see I got a little wheel bite there. I keep my trucks tight too, so. But I'm not jumping down those things. All right, so Police Academy 4. This was my first job on a movie set. I was doubling David Spade. I can tell you that he did not want to learn how to skate. He was vehemently against it. David already skated. In fact, I think he got hired because he was a comedian and was into skating. So a lot of this stuff you'll see is David really doing his own skating. So this is basically the Bones Brigade. Mike McGill, Tommy Guerrero, Steve Caballero. That's Lance Mountain, that's Tommy. So we put flints in our trucks, and so when we would grind, it would make that sparking sensation. And the boards were like roughly 11 inches, 12 inches wide at that time. I think more like 11. I'm in the pink shirt right there. So I'm David Spade. And at some point in this shoot, I went through a growth spurt. From the time I got hired for this movie to the time it shot, I actually had grown quite a bit. And about a week into shooting, the director said, this guy's too tall to stunt double for David Spade, so we got to get rid of him. And I was quietly let go from the movie. And they brought in Chris Miller, who looked much more like David, but is regular foot. So every once in a while you'll see the stance change in these scenes, and that's Chris Miller. They were trying to get me to stay low. I remember like in these scenes, every time that I'd go by the camera, they'd be like, stay low, stay low. Sorry, David. Okay, so this scene's pretty cool, where we go down the stairs. That was a pretty big set of stairs in those days, and so we all agreed to do it. And if you look at Mike McGill right there in the red, he couldn't ollie that far down the stairs, so he started way further ahead of us and early grabbed it. See how he's grabbing his board? He's actually lifting it up himself. And like, even though at the time we were like, that's kind of cheating, that's super hard. Early grabbing stairs is no joke. So I find that interesting. Every time I see that clip, I think, I can't believe Mike early grabbed 2 sets of stairs like that. So during this shoot, if we came to a stunt like that, we learned early on that if we acted nervous about the stunt, that they would give us extra money. So they said, we'll give you guys a stunt bump. And so we would come upon that like, oh man, I don't know. And they're like, okay, we'll give you guys each $200 extra. Like, oh, okay. We had no idea that was like the secret to doing stunts at the time. The coolest part about this is that we were on a Hollywood production, so we just had free reign of downtown Toronto. So if we chose a spot, they would go get it approved. This is the kind of thing that I used to do as a teenager. We would get arrested for that in a parking garage. And here we had full approval and we're getting paid for it. It was crazy. That's David. So this is all really David Spade doing his own skate stunts. That's called a ho-ho. In the 80s, that was kind of a thing where people were emulating tricks from a vert ramp and doing handstands and hand plants. And then if you could let go of your board and balance it on both feet, that was called a ho-ho. I think the idea that cops are prejudicing at skaters just because it came from the time when there were no skate parks around, and the only places to skate were private property or public property. And so you would go literally make the urban landscape your skate park because all the skate parks were closed down, especially in the early 90s. And I think that's when it got at the height of the sort of friction between skaters and cops, because cops were just kicking people out everywhere, but not providing places for us to do it. I liked it. I liked how it represented skating, you know, during its sort of underground revolutionary time period in the early 90s. Mid 90s, of course, but I associate skating's sort of rebirth from the years 92 to 95-ish. That was when street skating really came into its own, and I think that's sort of the era that this covers. Yeah, I mean, that's a real street spot right there. There's been quite a few stunts done over that. I think Day One put a ledge across there at some point. I mean, this feels like a real session like that, where people egging each other on to try something. And it's like, yeah, can you ollie it? You know, and everyone has their own skill level, so they're trying to challenge each other with what they think would sort of push their own limits. This gap, like this roof gap, is not huge, but to someone who just started skating, looks terrifying. And that's well represented here, where it's like some kid's just like, all right, I'm gonna push my boundaries. I'm gonna try. And that is the first mistake of trying something big, is stopping yourself before the gap, because we've seen, as with many viral videos, people can't stop themselves. They end up just, worst case scenario, falling into the gap. It's better to just let your momentum take you across, even if you're not gonna make it.
Yeah, going fast enough. Yo, wait, hey.
And he's obviously does not have enough speed. That was pretty legit right there. It would be someone who doesn't have the skill level, but is trying it anyway, you know, way outside their comfort zone, and then paying the price. And probably, you know, if I were to look at this in reality, a kid like that doesn't see the worst case scenario, really doesn't see the actual risk of what's happening, and has the advantage of being naive. At this point is when you realize this is a stunt more than a slam, because his ollie is one that he's trying to land on his back. And he's trying to not hit the other side. So this is where it becomes like skate, fall, but not a real skate fall, and more of a stunt fall. Because in reality, if he were to ollie, his upper body would be over his nose like that, and he would have directed his upper body at least to get onto the other side. But because they want him to fall straight through the gap, he's got to do this sort of back, we call that the Wilson, because of Mr. Wilson, Dennis the Menace. So if you ever fall backwards, that's a Wilson. And the whole thing is, stuff like this happens, keep filming. Nowadays especially. Yeah, it's scary, man. I've seen plenty of people get knocked out, and you really don't know. You never know how severe it is. You never know, like, what internal damage is happening. I mean, that's probably the most frightening aspect of getting injured, is head injuries, for sure. And obviously we know a lot more now than we ever have. But I went to the hospital for big injuries. I mean, my first concussion, I knocked out my front teeth too. But in later years, you start to sort of learn the severity of your other injuries, especially cuts and even bruises, or to a certain extent fractures. And so when I was in my probably 20s, I took care of plenty of abrasions and stitches, like did my own, you know, not stitches, but like you buy steri strips, you close it up. I have a scar, oh no, right here. I cut from here to here, and I went to the hospital and waited so long in the waiting room that I just gave up and went and got tape and taped it up, and because we were on tour, and it healed like that. So it's kind of like that kind of stuff where you realize you could probably take care of the injury yourself, and you know, a lot of us didn't have insurance and stuff, so we go to the hospital, like, we didn't even have money to pay for it. You just sort of learn to deal with the injury as your own. This is me. I am Will Ferrell in this clip. So this is Daddy's Home. We shot this in New Orleans, and I was offered the job of being a stunt double for Will Ferrell at a very minimum price, and the answer is yes, always. If you're asked to stunt double Will Ferrell, whatever price they offer you, take it. I was honored. The only bummer was that this ramp was super small, and so it was hard to do any sort of big vert tricks. We were doing the best we could with like hand plants and rock and rolls, and that's just super basic ramp tricks. So the idea is that he's dusting off his board from the 80s. And then Will gets fired up to demonstrate his dormant skate skills. And he has my board. That's a legitimate production model right there. The wheels are pretty big. I think they're mini cubics. So that's a bit of an exaggeration with how big those wheels are. I would have seen that board in the 80s somewhere. I had to do this first stunt here where you see him up on the roof. And I was actually feeding skate locations to Will Ferrell while he was taunting Mark Wahlberg. So he's talking about, this is how we used to do it. And I would say, like, in Reseda, in Upland, at Whittier.
Hey, who'd like to see how we used to do it back in the empty pools of Encino, Castaic, Irvine, Long Beach, Santa Clarita, Santa Cruz, Fremont?
So I did this part on a wire right here. That first ollie, I was actually on a harness wire and trying to keep the board on my feet as long as I could until it finally dropped off. So right there. This is a pretty fun story. I actually tried to do a McTwist for that move because that's you see when I take off from the ramp, I kind of tuck. And so I'm turning it into a 540. That's me right there. And then I grab the board. That's when they do CGI and they push me all the way up into the tree. But on the actual attempt that I did, they wanted me to fall. I didn't pull out far enough and I ended up hitting the coping with my leg on the way down and ripping it open right here and getting stitches. So I have stitches from this exact trick and this exact scene from bouncing off the coping. And I remember laying there and thinking like, well, you got your slam that you wanted. That's a harness, but see, I was trying to make it look like a real ollie as much as I could. So they allowed me to fall until my board actually left my feet, and then they caught me. I think I've seen this.
Wow.
So if you have a rail that is actually doing such a sharp angle like that, it's pretty impossible to stay on the rail and make the turn unless it's actually a curve. And even then, there are very, very few people that could ever do that. Generally, you wouldn't drop the board and flip it like that, but it is rather fancy. If you're really trying to get speed in a situation like that, you're grabbing the nose and you're running as fast as you can with the board and dropping it. And so to drop it into like a flip like that would slow you down, but here we are. And you can tell that ollie, there's something about the way that, see, he ollies and his board almost goes vertical, and it feels like something else is holding the board to his feet. There's something about that motion that is unnatural for a real ollie. Like it's almost like he did a wall right up to it. There was some invisible ramp leading him up to the rail. And I've never seen anyone grind a handrail with snow on it, but it's possible. He goes from one rail to the next, back to the other one, and then into a 360 grab onto another rail. Yeah, see, now we're in video game territory. It just gets crazy. And I hate to say that this stuff's impossible because I have seen someone actually go from one rail to the next, but in a very smaller setting. But to do it in such a massive area, like with such long stairs, such a long rail, we're way out of reality.
So he totally bailed. Is that a saying?
Okay, so if you say someone bailed, that means they intentionally fell off their board. Like if you're gonna try something and you know you're not gonna make it, or you're just testing it out, or you just don't feel like you can do it, you would actually bail off, like bail out, right? What he did was he tried to make it, so he slammed. A slam is when you think you have it and you're straight into the ground. Bail is intentional, slam is a mistake. I feel like Back to the Future is a hugely important movie for skateboarding, especially in the 80s. It influenced a whole generation of kids to start trying skating. You know, many of the older pros now started skating because of this movie. It influenced them to get their first board.
How much money you got on you?
Well, how much you want, Biff?
So here's an interesting fact about Back to the Future. Eric Stoltz was originally Marty McFly, and they shot with Eric Stoltz for 5 weeks, and he had a stunt double that was a skater, Bob Schmelzer. For the first 5 weeks, they shot with those two guys and shot a bunch of skate footage with them, and then ended up letting Eric Stoltz go. So they ended up hiring Michael J. Fox. So they had to reshoot all the skate scenes, but some of the scenes they still used Bob Schmelzer, even though he wasn't Michael J. Fox's stunt double, because the skating was so good. So that was Perry Willander. Props to both of them. So there's a couple different skaters in this.
Whoa, kid, stop. Hey. Boy. I'll get it back to you, all right?
And I love the idea that Marty McFly is the one who inspired kids to take the boxes off their skateboards, because that was, the original skateboards were scooters like that. The only issue that I have with this is that the board itself has 2 sets of trucks, so it has 4 trucks and 8 wheels, and that may seem cool, but if you truly rode a board like that, the trucks would counteract each other. So as you're standing on it, it would kind of force itself to keep going straight. You'd have to get all the way on one side to make it turn, because you only want to be on those 2 wheels or turn the other way on those 2 wheels. So this skateboard would be so hard to ride like that. The original skateboard was a piece of wood with roller skate wheels and trucks, but only 2 in the front and 2 in the back. So you would have 4 wheels. This is an 8-wheeler, but these guys managed to ride it, and you can tell how they sort of forced a kicktail on it. So there's a little pad on the back there. That is not something that would have been on a scooter, but they needed it for this effect, and also so that they could put flints in it, so they could do that sparking thing. Why do movies have to have sparking skateboards? I don't know. But all this is real. This is holding on to the truck and skitching, I guess we would call it. And then this right here, it wasn't a great ollie, but it was real. So that's what I like about that scene right there. He clearly went off a jump ramp because of the angle of the board is already kicked up. So he's not doing a real ollie on that board, and he has use of a ramp. So you can see the real skateboard wheels there. They switched the board up to one that's more functional. So that's like real trucks and real wheels on a board that kind of looks like that stunt board, because they weren't doing the stunts on that 8-wheeler with steel wheels. That just wasn't happening. But on a board that small, with such a dysfunctional kicktail, to do an ollie over a bush like that I thought was pretty impressive. And then this, he's going fakie. That makes it a little bit harder because he's going backwards. That was a pretty good move. It would be hard to actually time the skateboard if it was already rolling backwards. You would have to give it its own sort of push through, but it worked for the scene. I thought it was clever riding. That was a weird stop though, because generally if you're stopping on a skateboard, you're doing it with your heel. If you do it with your toe, it throws you into a spin. You could see why his board sort of turned a 90 degree as he came to a stop, because he was dragging his toe, and that sort of forced it into that angle. If we're skating and we want to slow down, we generally will straighten our back foot and drag our heel like that, so that it's sort of a rudder that keeps you slow, and it keeps your board straight, and it also prevents your tail from scraping on the ground. Because when you were a kid, you'd scrape your tail to come to a stop, and then your tail would end up getting worn out. It's called razor tail. And so you'd have this sort of death, almost knife on the back of your board, and if it ever hit you, it would cut you. Yeah, that board seemed to morph into a few different incarnations. It had white wheels on it for a while. It had the wider trucks. It was more modern shaped. But hey, I'm thankful. I'm so thankful for Back to the Future that they included skateboarding, and that it inspired kids to start riding skateboards. And that was, for the time and place, and for what they were trying to accomplish with showing that he created modern skateboarding, it was perfect. That was it. That was me dissecting the skate scenes of movies, breaking them down. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the movies.